Hello and welcome, dear students, to this lecture on topic Constituent Assembly of India, its composition and functioning. Let's first have a quick look to the objectives of the lecture. The objectives of the lecture are to trace the origins of the Constituent Assembly of India, to study the rationale of the Cabinet Mission Plan 1946, to study how Constituent Assembly was microcosm of India. Dear students, India is a sovereign democratic republic. The government is duly elected by the people on the basis of universal adult franchise. The government is run within the framework of Constitution, the supreme law of the land. The Constitution of India was drafted and approved by the Constituent Assembly of India. The Assembly was comprised of the representatives of the people drawn from different socio-religious and cultural backgrounds adhering variegated political ideas. This made Constituent Assembly what Granville Austin described it as the microcosm in action. It incorporated all the aims, aspirations and commitments nurtured by the Indian nationalist movement during freedom struggle. The Constituent Assembly drafted and approved the lengthiest constitution of the world and outlined the democratic idea of India, its identity, government structure and vision, to be realized by following the basic rules of the democratic framework enshrined in the Constitution. Dear students, the idea of Constituent Assembly for India to determine its own destiny by the chosen representatives of her people was demanded by Mahatma Gandhi in 1922 when he said that Swaraj or self-rule would not be the gift of the British Parliament but must spring from the wishes of the people of all India as expressed through their freely chosen representatives. In 1934, the Indian National Congress also made the demand for a Constituent Assembly comprised of elected representatives of people to be elected on the basis of adult franchise and also representatives of minorities elected by their electors to draw the Constitution of India. It was after the end of the World War II that the dream of having Constituent Assembly to determine the future of India finally saw the light of the day. The Labour Party in Britain won election and formed the government. It had made a commitment that it will grant independence to India and had made it a part of its election manifesto. In line with its promise, Prime Minister Clement Attlee announced that Britain would transfer power to India. However, before transfer of power to India could take place, they sent a mission to India in March 1946, popularly known as Cabinet Mission Plan. It was a three-member body headed by Sir Stafford Cripps. The other two members were Lord Patrick Lawrence and Mr. Alexander. Its mission was to draw a scheme of transfer of power in consultation with major political parties and interests and to negotiate between the leadership of Indian National Congress and All India Muslim League, who were not on the same page about the future of India after British exit. By this time, the political and communal question had become a very serious issue, as Muslim League under its president Muhammad Ali Jinnah was adamant over its demand for a separate state for Muslims based on Muslim League's Lahore Resolution of 1940. The Congress, on the other hand, was in favor of a united country. Therefore, the objective of the Cabinet Mission Plan was to bring the two parties on an agreed formula that would lead to independent India. The Shimla Conference, convened by Viceroy Lord Wavell to bring an agreement between Congress and Muslim League, ended in failure. The efforts of Cabinet Mission Plan 2 failed to break the ice to resolve the differences between leadership of two political parties. In 1946, elections in provinces in British India were held. The mandate reflected a clear division among the electors. Congress won 90% of the votes cast for the central legislature in open, non-Muslim constituencies for central legislature. However, what was important was the massive electoral transformation that Muslim League saw, and this reinforced its claim of speaking on behalf of the Muslims. The party, unlike in 1937, won all 30 reserved Muslim seats in the central legislature and 442 of 500 Muslim seats in provincial assemblies. This heightened the already existing disagreement between Congress and Muslim League. After having failed to break the impasse, the Cabinet Mission announced its own plan as a way forward before transfer of power could take place to India. It proposed a confederation with 3 regional groups, 3-tier structure, for United India as Muslim League for a separate state, and a separate Constituent Assembly were not accepted by the Cabinet Mission plan. Group A was to comprise central Hindu majority areas, Group B the northwest Muslim majority areas, and Group C would comprise Assam and Bengal. The central government was to be a small government with power and authority to deal with 3 subjects only, as defense, foreign affairs and communications. All residuary powers would vest with the provinces and states only. It was on the basis of this formula that constitution acceptable to all concerned was to be framed. Both Congress and Muslim League accepted the proposed scheme of Cabinet Mission. This to some extent satisfied the Muslim League, as this was the maximum leverage it could gain in a bargain. By this scheme, the British hoped they could at once preserve the United India desired by the Congress and by themselves, and at the same time through the groups secured the essence of Jinnah's demand for Pakistan. It was close to giving what he wanted, which was not so much as independent state, but a large Pakistan of provinces. At all costs, Jinnah wished to avoid what he called in 1944 a maimed, mutilated and moth-eaten Pakistan, in which all non-Muslim majority districts, regions comprising some 40% of Bengal and Punjab would be shorn from the new state. However, the differences between the two parties reached to a climax when the newly elected Congress President Jawaharlal Nehru made a statement that Congress would enter the Constituent Assembly and would not be bound by the agreements, and that Congress would change or modify the Cabinet Mission plan as it thought best. Muhammad Ali Jinnah took this as betrayal of trust, and Muslim League withdrew itself from Cabinet Mission plan and boycotted Constituent Assembly to vehemently pursue the idea of separate state for Muslims that was realized with the birth of Pakistan on 14th August 1947. For the purpose of electing the Constituent Assembly to frame the Constitution, the Cabinet Mission divided India into 3 sections with seats allocation in the ratio of 1:1 lakh. The seats in each province were divided into 3 main communities: General, Muslims and Sikhs. No fresh elections were to be held, but the members of the Constituent Assembly were to be elected by the provincial legislative body constituted in 1946 on the basis of proportional representation with single transferable vote system. The members of the Cabinet Mission also recommended that 1 representative from each Delhi, Ajmer, Marwara and Coorg should be added to Section A. Princely states numbering around 565 were given seats not exceeding 93, but the method of their election was left to the Constituent Assembly and the rulers of the princely states to decide. In all, Constituent Assembly had total 393 members. The Constituent Assembly for the Undivided India met on 9th December 1946 and held its first sitting. Muslim League boycotted the Constituent Assembly and demanded a separate homeland for Muslims in India in Muslim majority provinces. The persistent deadlock between Congress and Muslim League convinced the British that the final solution to the problem lay in partition of India. In March 1947, Lord Louis Mountbatten was appointed Governor-General of India. He came up with a partition plan on 3rd June 1947 as a solution to political and communal problem. The British also fixed June 1948 as the date of transfer of power to India, that is independence, but its division into two countries as India and Pakistan. The date was later preponed to August 15, 1947. On August 14, 1947, Pakistan was born, comprised of territories from northwest and northeast of India. All members of Bengal, Punjab, Sindh, northwest frontier provinces, Baluchistan and Sylhet districts of Assam that constituted the territories of Pakistan ceased to be the members of the Constituent Assembly that reassembled on 14th August 1947 as the Constituent Assembly for the Dominion of India. There was a fresh election in the new provinces of West Bengal and East Punjab. The partition reduced the strength of Constituent Assembly to 299 members. Dear students, let's now discuss the composition of the Constituent Assembly. The Constituent Assembly of India was a one-party body in an essentially one-party country. The Assembly was the Congress and the Congress was India, as written by Austin. As stated earlier, the members of the Constituent Assembly were elected by the provincial assemblies constituted in 1946 elections. The Congress had formed government in 8 out of 11 British India provinces and had won 58% seats, that is 925 out of 1585 seats. Its arch rival Muslim League had swept the Muslim reserved seats. However, the boycott by Muslim League made position of Congress in the Constituent Assembly as predominant. Out of 296 general seats for provinces, Congress filled 208. In all, Congress had 69% of the total members in the Constituent Assembly, and after partition it rose to 82%. However, it's important to bear in mind that Congress was not a monolithic party catering to a particular interest only. It had a pan-India presence and represented the idea of India encompassing all diversities of India within it. It had members across religions, languages, castes, classes and practicing different spectrum of political ideologies. The social and ideological coalition nature of Congress made it possible to send representatives to Constituent Assembly representing every shade of the opinion. The top leadership of the Congress made it to the Constituent Assembly. Leaders like Jawaharlal Nehru, Sardar Patel, Rajendra Prasad and Maulana Abul Kalam Azad were the members of the Constituent Assembly. These four formed what Granville Austin called oligarchy within the Constituent Assembly in view of their influence, wisdom and godlike status. The other leaders in the Constituent Assembly included G.B. Pant, Raj Gopalacharya, Sarojini Naidu, Patabi Sitaramaiah, A.K. Iyer, etc. The Congress Working Committee followed an innovative consensual method of electing members from provincial assemblies to the Constituent Assembly that included non-Congress members with vast experience and talent in administration and constitutional law at their disposal. These members were like A.K. Iyer, H.N. Khunzru, N.G. Iyengar, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, K. Santhanam, M.R. Jayakar, K.M. Munshi, etc. It was because of this broad-based policy that Congress Working Committee gave adequate representation to minorities as well. The Indian Christians had 7 members in the Assembly. 3 Anglo-Indians were also elected to the Constituent Assembly. Ideologically, Constituent Assembly was a diverse body. Its members, as Congress, were from a variegated ideologies, and the inclusion of non-Congress members by Congress further added to the ideological spectrum of the Constituent Assembly. B.R. Ambedkar, the voice of Dalits, was elected on Congress ticket. 2 prominent leaders of Hindu Mahasabha, M.R. Jayakar and Shyama Prasad Mukherjee, were also members of the Constituent Assembly. Besides, there were socialists, communists, Gandhians among the Congress members. The fusion of different shades of opinion added in the value of debates in the Constituent Assembly. The Constitution of India that this body crafted gave everyone a sense of belongingness. In the words of K. Santhanam, and I quote, "There are hardly any shade of opinion not represented in Constituent Assembly," unquote. This made Constituent Assembly a highly representative body despite Congress dominance. The Constituent Assembly was elected to frame and approve the Constitution of India. It is true that the Constituent Assembly was indirectly elected by the provincial assemblies that were elected in 1946 elections, in which only 28.5% of the adult population had voted. This, however, does not question the representative character of the Constituent Assembly. After the partition of the country, the position of Congress became predominant in Constituent Assembly. However, Congress was not a party of a particular segment or ideology. It was what Granville Austin wrote, "Assembly was Congress and Congress was India." It was an umbrella party and reflected the socio-cultural, economic and political diversity of India. The Congress even elected non-Congress members to the Constituent Assembly to benefit from their experience and knowledge. Every shade of opinion was represented in the Constituent Assembly. The Constituent Assembly had the responsibility to translate the commitments and promises of the nationalist movement into practice. It had to shape the destiny of India and how Indians will collectively govern themselves as a nation state. The Constituent Assembly accomplished its task in a democratic manner with the participation of all by following the basic norms in its working. With these words, dear students, I conclude this lecture. Hope you find it useful. Goodbye and God bless you.